Hello, and welcome to Jonathan Tobin Daily. I'm JNS Editor-in-Chief Jonathan Tobin. Thanks for joining me for another discussion on the most pressing issues in the Jewish world. Please like, subscribe, and give us good reviews when you listen to the show. Now let's get started. The announcement that Colonel Daniel Davis was tapped to be Deputy Director of National Intelligence sent shockwaves through the pro-Israel community earlier this week. The post involves supervision of the president's daily brief, a compendium of vital intelligence information that goes to the White House and senior figures throughout the government. That gives anyone in the job a singular ability to direct discourse and influence policy. And for it to go to Davis, whose hostility to Israel is a matter of long-standing record, seemed to indicate that, for want of a better term, the woke right was getting into position to wreck the alliance with the Jewish state. The naming of Davis to this key post by Tulsi Gabbard, Director of National Intelligence, came right after President Donald Trump's hostage envoy, Adam Boehler, let loose with some bizarre remarks about his direct contacts with Hamas. The combination of the two stories, coupled with worries about two appointees of the Department of Defense with troubling backgrounds, including antisemitic social media posts and attacks on Israel, raised doubts about where the administration actually stood. But almost as soon as it was announced, Davis's appointment was pulled, and within 24 hours of Boehler's gobsmacking comments, Secretary of State Marco Rubio was dismissing Boehler's work, with the envoy walking back his puzzling efforts to make nice with the Hamas terrorist organization in a post on X. Moreover, looming above all of these stories was a factor that drained them of much of their significance. Trump's continued public advocacy not only of support for Israel, but of commitments to destroy Hamas and fight the surge of anti-Semitism on American college campuses. The Trump presidency can seem like a vortex of chaos most days. The dizzying onslaught of initiatives coming from the White House on both domestic and foreign policy is hard for even experienced journalists to keep track of. And, as is generally the case in Washington, the array of competing factions and ideas, all vying for the attention of the man in the Oval Office, creates an atmosphere that can look like disarray, if not anarchy. Add into the mix a hostile mainstream media, eager to exploit any hint of division within the ranks of Trump's supporters. Under these circumstances, it can often be difficult to tell the difference between what is real and what is spin when determining where the administration stands on any issue. Yet if there is anything the world should have learned about Trump by now, it is that he is the one making the big decisions. Everyone does well to monitor what his aides, cabinet secretaries, and other officials are doing and saying. The same is true for other figures in his inner circle or its periphery, whether or not they hold office. But the moment we start overthinking the potential influence of anyone not named Donald J. Trump, we generally make mistakes. That is the proper context for evaluating administration policy on the Middle East and its stance on anti-Semitism in the United States. And that is doubly true when it comes to understanding just how pervasive the influence of conservatives who are hostile to Israel and tolerant of Jew hatred has become. The woke right can make itself heard, but there should be no doubt about the primary source of anti-Semitism in the United States today. The Democratic Party, which is increasingly dominated by its intersectional left wing, is no longer reliably pro-Israel or even willing to support measures aimed at curbing anti-Semitism. Anti-Israel figures within the right are marginal. Those on the left are calling the tune for their party, as demonstrated by the way that most Democrats have opposed Trump's efforts to deport a pro-Hamas Palestinian foreign agitator at Columbia University. Still, no one should dismiss the disturbing evidence of anti-Semitism and hostility to Israel that has emerged on the right, or the way some of those associated with it have elbowed their way into Trump world. At the top of that list is former Fox News host Tucker Carlson, who is relentlessly hostile to Israel and Jewish concerns. He remains a fixture within the Trump family inner circle, even if his influence on the president's foreign policy is, at least as far as Israel and the Middle East is concerned, minimal. Carlson has used his show, which can be viewed on X, to host a number of figures who have engaged in attacks on Israel and the war it is waging on Hamas, including Davis and economist Jeffrey Sachs. He also recently platformed a Holocaust denier. His most recent show, a fawning interview with the Prime Minister of Qatar, an ally of Hamas and Iran, was even more embarrassing than his tete-a-tete last year with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Carlson's skepticism about the cause of Ukraine appears to be shared by both Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance, even if his attacks on Kyiv are far more extreme than even the White House's tough stance towards Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky might be. But the notion that Israel's security is tied to the dubious prospect of a Ukrainian victory over Russia is a myth. It is largely the work of Zelensky's fans who want to tie flagging support for that war to the much more popular cause of the Jewish state's battle against Islamist terror. Much of what Carlson is doing recently seems a transparent effort towards convincing Trump to abandon Israel and go easy on Iran, views that are clearly at odds with the president's stance and that of almost all of the top figures in his administration. Just as troubling is the way even more popular podcaster is platforming anti-Israel conspiracy theorists. Joe Rogan's show is viewed by more people than just about any show on broadcast and cable TV news channels. His lengthy interviews with politicians have an outsized impact on their fortunes. Reportedly, former Vice President Kamala Harris feared having to sit for a multi-hour grilling by Rogan and passed up a chance to appear on his program. And in an election year where traditional media was largely displaced by podcasts in terms of influence, he's become one of the most important people in the media. Yet, in addition to hosting people like Trump, he recently platformed antisemitic conspiracy theorist Ian Carroll, who alleged that Israel is behind a cover-up about financiering convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein's crimes. In 2023, Rogan echoed the anti-Semitic stands of Representative Ilhan Omar about Jews buying influence. Lesser figures like Candace Owens are even more brazen in their crackpot anti-Semitism. But taken as a whole, it's easy to see how, whatever else they disagree about, the far left and the far right have common ground when it comes to hatred for Jews and Israel. Yet the salient point about all this is, despite the large audiences these people can reach, when it comes to their attitudes on Israel, Iran, Hamas, and anti-Semitism, they have far more in common with the political left than with Trump and the overwhelming majority of his supporters. When Davis said that American support for Israel was a stain on our character as a nation, as a culture that will not soon go away, he sounded more like a member of the left-wing congressional squad than a would-be Trump administration staffer. That they are tolerated by Trump and Vance, or remain adjacent to them in some ways, is unsettling. Still, Republicans and most conservatives remain strong supporters of Israel, as polls continue to show, even as liberals and left-wingers continue to abandon it. As volatile as his personality may be, Trump has stayed remarkably consistent when it comes to backing the Jewish state since he entered politics 10 years ago. His statements about Hamas and his bitter criticisms of Democrats for their unwillingness to back Israel or to support his measures aimed at stopping anti-Semitism in the United States make it clear that Carlson, Rogan, Davis, and Owens have zero impact on the president's policies or the views of his voters. That leaves the question of where Trump will ultimately come down concerning the negotiations between Israel and Hamas for extending the ceasefire hostage release deal that went into effect, largely because of the president's influence, in January. The various statements about the talks by Steve Witkoff, his special envoy to the Middle East, and Bowler betray their lack of experience in the region. Bowler, in particular, deserved to be fired for his appalling comments on CNN, in which he spoke of the murderers of Hamas as human, like everybody else. This may be part of what Trump considers the art of the deal, in which he plays the bad cop and his hapless envoys are nice to the terrorists. The president, however, has left no doubt about his demands for the release of all the hostages Hamas still holds, and his willingness to back Israel's campaign to eradicate the Islamist group from Gaza. His vision of the Strip is one where the Palestinians have been moved out, thus eliminating a persistent threat to Israel's security and existence. Unlike the case with the Biden administration, which did everything it could to hamstring Jerusalem's efforts to finish off Hamas. The main obstacle to that goal is not in the White House. Rather, it's in Israel, where Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu must weigh domestic political pressure against a renewed war on Hamas because it might endanger the lives of the remaining hostages. If Hamas survives this war, it won't be Trump's fault. Supporters of Israel are never going to rest easy or have complete confidence in any president, no matter how supportive he may be to their cause. And the loud voices on the right, who are mimicking the hatred and bigotry of the left, illustrates a perennial attraction of anti-Semitism for those who dwell in the fever swamps of American politics, whether on the right or left. That said, there's no reasonable argument to be made for doubting the sincerity or the reliability of Donald Trump's stance on Israel and anti-Semitism. Thanks for listening. Please remember to tune in every day for Jonathan Tobin Daily Edition and every week for Think Twice, my full-length JNS TV program. Whether you're listening to us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube Music, or any of the other podcast platforms, or on the JNS YouTube channel, please like and or subscribe to JNS, click on the bell for notifications, and give us good reviews. Please write to us at thinktwice@jns.org and let us know where you listen or watch the show and what you think about it. And remember, keep reading and thinking for yourself.